Well, it's official. The early 90s are cool again. We're all about ninjas, we're all about robots, and we're all about dinosaurs. Only not in this game. We're only into the first two things in this game. I don't think there's any dinosaurs. There might be. Actually, there might be some dinosaurs, but honestly, the whole thing went by in such a cloud of exciting frustration. I'm struggling to remember half of what I encountered. Cyber Shadow, again, clearly inspired by the world of 8-bit and even clearly inspired by a specific franchise, which is so obvious I don't even need to mention it. Released on, well, practically everything this week. PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, Steam. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if it got a Dreamcast release as well. What shocks me is that, one, the game came straight to Xbox Gamepass, and without that I probably would have never gotten around to playing it, and two, I've no idea where this game came from. I don't know if I've had my head up my arse for the past however long, but I don't recall seeing any previews for the game, nor any mention of it at all outside of this release window. And I was going to pass it over. The name was a little bland. The 8-bit ninja shtick had already been done and, let's be honest, pretty much perfected in 2018's The Messenger, which, incidentally, will end up being a continual comparison point for this review. But I thought, you know what? I've got an Xbox Series S, I've got Game Pass, I'll give it a go. Let's jump in blind. Let's see what it's got to give. And wow. Not initially wow. Initially it was but then it evolved into WoW. It evolved into WoW over the course of 2 days of playing, getting frustrated, switching it off, sitting there for 30 minutes thinking about the game, switching it back on, getting a little further, getting frustrated, switching it back off. Over and over again, the game threw these skill checks at me that gradually ramped up to the point where I effectively had to become one with my controller. My fingers had to be hardwired directly into my eyes just so I had the reaction time to deal with what was happening on screen. First, though, let's rewind. The game was developed by Aarne MekaSkull Hunziker, who you may know previously from nothing. I think this may be his first commercial release, which, if that is the case, well done, that man. Published by Yacht Club Games, the guys behind the ever-popular Shovel Knight, it seems like Cyber Shadow is an obvious fit for the specific niche they're going for. Because, let me put this up front first, Cyber Shadow is a specific niche. If you don't like your games difficult, you're probably going to have a bad time. If you get frustrated easily, you're going to have a bad time. If your fingers fail you in other games, then you may as well be hammering a pair of bloody stumps at the control pad here. Cyber Shadow starts off relatively slow and shallow, but builds itself up to a beautiful ballet of swirling swords and defensive dodges. Starting with the most basic of movement and attacks, level 1 initially feels like a retro homage to a faulty degree. Sure, it looks nice and the music is fantastic, but in terms of what you actually do at this early point of the game, it essentially boils down to walking, jumping, and attacking with your sword. Fine enough, all in working order. Thankfully, however, Cyber Shadow doesn't take too long to start adding to your arsenal of moves. Firstly, there's a projectile weapon, followed by an attack that can shoot fireballs upwards, then a downward slash which can also be used to bounce off enemies, then further still you get the ability to dash, wall slide, and parry attacks. Each ability you gain is almost immediately put to use in the level you gained it in, and every level going forward, moving the game away from the humdrum walk and slash of level 1 all the way up to the meow, pew, 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 of later levels. And initially, I thought this was a mistake. The dash and parry abilities, for instance, are two of the later, if not the last, abilities that you get, and even before I knew they existed, they were two items I really wanted from the start. Part of that comes down to the way I like to enjoy games. I'm someone who plays platform games with the run button held down firmly, only releasing when I start to get finger cramp. So having no way to zip through a level was, at first, a bit of a drag. It was only as the difficulty began to ramp up in later levels and all of your abilities need to be used in conjunction with each other that I realised what the game was doing. It was providing the power creep with a huge tipping point, and that tipping point was being met by some incredibly tight level design. It began to remind me of other indie games I've fallen in love with over the past few years, namely The Messenger, Celeste, Spelunky 2. All of these games provide you with a specific toolset for completing their levels, and becoming adept with that toolset allows you to absolutely fly through the game's challenges if you can pull it off. Each death leads to an instant restart at a checkpoint, and there's practically no downtime. You died? No worries, go ahead, go again, this time don't die. You pick up the muscle memory, you improve continuously, and end up soaring through levels at a breakneck speed when you finally do get things to click. The repetition brought about by consistent failure ends up being a fantastic teacher, and you end up... Look, I don't want to sound like IGN here, but yes, Cyber Shadow really makes you feel like a ninja. Oh God, I feel sick just saying it. Disgusting. Ignore my words. If that all sounds like a nightmare wrapped up in a cloud of frustration, well, there are concessions here. Ones that stop the game from becoming a complete brick wall to those who are fingerly challenged. Each checkpoint generally recharges your health, but as well as that, you can spend any essence you've picked up, herein referred to as coins, because they're basically coins, let's be honest. Depending on the checkpoint, you can unlock health regeneration if it isn't unlocked by default. You can unlock spirit? I want to say spirit, but again, it's basically just mana. You can unlock mana regeneration, used for abilities like your shurikens and flame sword. The other thing you can unlock, and perhaps the most exciting, is a special weapon. Special weapons will be destroyed if you take around 3 hits, but what they offer up is generally well worth putting your coins into. There are floating guns, some of which fire when you slash your sword, some of which fire automatically. There's a giant shield which can be flung off toward an enemy with a sword swipe. There's a big mechanical death yo-yo that's attached to your body and flings around with exciting momentum, and is practically impossible to get to do what you want it to do, but it doesn't matter because it looks cool, and sometimes it accidentally kills things. There's a great mix there, and you're pretty much guaranteed to be unlocking something that's actually going to be useful for the level at hand. If you're coming up against an area with a lot of enemies that are far away, or require a precise shot, well, chances are that you can unlock the gun as a special weapon. Or not. That's the beauty here. The difficulty level is completely up to you when it comes to unlocking these extras, and with coins being a finite resource, you don't necessarily want to spend them when you've got a chance of scraping through by the skin of your teeth. Save it for when you really need the help, or be a double-hard bastard and never use them at all. Completely up to you. I like this. It's a great feature. What's not a great feature, however, are the controls. This may well be something that doesn't bother others, but it definitely bothered me, and while I can certainly understand the reasons behind the constraints the developer put in place, I can't help but feel it was a poor decision. Basically, this is a homage to the 8-bit era, and so are the controls. Instead of utilising multiple buttons on the controller you'll no doubt be using, Cyber Shadow opts for the NES route, putting your special attacks and abilities into button combinations. Up an attack fires a shuriken, down an attack while on the ground fires flames in the air, down an attack while in the air does your ground stomp. Double tapping left or right makes you dash, and thankfully you can actually assign this one to another button on the controller instead, because I found it wholly unreliable when you're trying to consistently keep a dash going. This is what bothers me though, the unreliability. When you're in the middle of a boss fight and there are enemies coming at you from all angles and bullets and there are gaps you can fall down and you need to fire off a specific special weapon, having everything crammed into this old-fashioned control method just feels like nostalgia grasping for the sake of it. I wouldn't even mind so much if there were simply other options, but there aren't. It speaks volumes that, in the case of Dash, the developer has bit the bullet and provided the player with an extra option. I just don't understand why he didn't go a little further with that and make the game a tad more accessible for those people who are sick of doing a ground stomp when they're meant to do a flame sword. Again, for the 100th time. While we're in complaint mode, let me bring up the story as well. It's not great. This is where my first comparison point to The Messenger would be. In that game, I wasn't expecting it to take a twist into the humorous, and I'm not saying that Cyber Shadow should have gone in that direction, but The Messenger ended up catching me off guard, delivering a mixture of comedy and serious elements in a way that kept me consistently engaged. Having completed Cyber Shadow, I don't have a fucking clue what's happened. Something about a woman and her dad, and something about a talking motorbike, and something about ninjas and robots. Part of that disinterest comes from my extremely short attention span, but part of it comes from none of the characters really being given any room to breathe. They're literally just there to fart out exposition, and none of that exposition made me want to go and do a mid-air dash, jump, triple kill any more than I already wanted to do it. I reckon I could rewrite one of the cutscenes right now in 2 minutes and make it more interesting. Okay, well, maybe not. Writing stories is hard. Personally, though, this doesn't really matter to me. I don't play games for the stories, and I certainly didn't come into this game expecting a grand epic. It just feels like a missed opportunity when everything else feels so beautifully put together. And that's the thing here, and the reason it's even being reviewed on this channel at all, in which I mostly talk about stuff from the past that people either barely remember or choose not to. Cyber Shadow shows that those core concepts can be brought up to date and improved upon without missing the point of what made those games so good in the first place. It also knows exactly which parts of those games not to bring forward into 2021, because let's be real here, for all the beauty that there is in retro games, there's an awful lot of bullshit that is simply off-putting to those who didn't grow up with it. Where retro games would have you starting from scratch after 10 minutes, Cyber Shadow maintains the difficulty but gives you checkpoints. Where retro games would throw everything at you all at once in order to ensure that only the best could see the credits roll, Cyber Shadow throws things at you on a gradual curve. It gives you options to bring that difficulty level more in line with your abilities, and it never pushes itself into the realms of difficult for difficulty's sake. It is a wonderful evolution of the games that came before it, and for me at least, absolutely nailed everything I love about those games while also being its own thing entirely. A retro heart contained within a sturdy modern ethos. And there's many a thing I've not even mentioned. The secret passageways that lead to power-ups, the ability to go back to previous levels with new abilities to find things you couldn't access before, the parry system taken almost wholesale from the risk-reward mechanics of Street Fighter 3, requiring you to tap forward into a bullet, turning it into a blue sphere of revenge that you can fling back at an enemy. The bosses, the bit where you're flying around on a big robot bike, the bit where the big robot bike turns into a big robot suit for you to wear. There is so much to love here for those who love retro gaming, and if you've got the reflexes to match the challenge it holds, I'm convinced you'll feel exactly the same.